The morning sun slid through the glass walls of Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, spilling gold across polished floors and restless travelers. Businessmen clutched coffee cups like shields, parents juggled strollers and carry-ons, and the hum of rolling suitcases filled Terminal B. Amid the chaos moved Ava Taylor, a woman whose quiet presence carried the weight of command. Her posture was unmistakable, shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes sharp. Years in military intelligence had carved dignity into her every step. Ava's Taylor Navy blazer bore a small silver eagle, the Korean War service pin that once belonged to her father. To the untrained eye, it was just a decoration. To her, it was a reminder of battles fought for a nation that hadn't always fought for her. Today, she was en route to a classified Pentagon briefing. The briefcase handcuffed to her wrist contained documents that could prevent international conflict. For Ava, this was another mission, one measured not in bullets but in restraint. At Gate 12, a uniformed TSA supervisor stood watching her with narrowed eyes. His name tag read Mason Clark, a man whose resentment had fermented into something toxic. 8 years in the agency, dozens of diversity seminars, and a career littered with buried complaints had hardened him. He was the kind of man who mistook authority for superiority. Ava approached the counter where Olivia Davis, the gate agent, smiled professionally. "Good morning, ma'am. Government flight authorization." Ava handed over her neatly prepared documents. Olivia scanned them, nodding. "All clear, Colonel Taylor. Boarding begins in 30 minutes. From across the corridor, Mason noticed the exchange and froze. A black woman, poised and confident, boarding first class on Pentagon business. His jaw clenched. His clipboard hung at his side like a weapon. He straightened his badge and strode toward them, authority dripping from every step. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, flashing his badge just high enough for everyone around to see. "I'll need to verify those documents." Olivia blinked. "They've already been cleared, Supervisor Clark." "I'll decide what's cleared," Mason replied sharply, his gaze never leaving Ava. He plucked the papers from her hand, flipping through them with exaggerated suspicion. His voice carried across the terminal. "Government travel authorization. Huh? And I'm supposed to believe this isn't a forgery?" The surrounding chatter dimmed. Passengers slowed to watch. Phones subtly rose, cameras opening. Ava kept her voice calm. "Those documents are legitimate, sir. I'm traveling on official Pentagon business." Mason's smirk twisted into something cruel. "Pentagon business? Right? And I'm the president. You people always have a story." The words landed like a slap. Ava's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. 22 years of service had taught her how to stand tall under fire, on battlefields and in boardrooms. She'd faced insurgents in Iraq and generals who doubted her competence. She wasn't about to break in an airport terminal. "Sir," Olivia tried again, "there's no reason to—" "Stay out of this," Mason snapped. "Security has reason to suspect falsified identification." He waved his radio theatrically. Backup requested at Gate 12 for a suspicious passenger with forged documents. A ripple of unease moved through the gate area. A father whispered to his son. A woman clutched her handbag tighter. The unspoken tension, the kind only America's airports could breed, settled like fog. Ava exhaled slowly, her mind calculating. She could escalate, or she could endure. Her mission depended on discretion. The classified data in her briefcase couldn't risk public exposure. Every move had to be deliberate. "You have no cause for detainment," she said firmly, her voice carrying quiet authority. "Check my clearance through Pentagon operations." Mason ignored her. "I said step aside for additional screening." "Additional screening for what reason?" "Because I said so." He gripped her elbow, his fingers digging into the fabric of her blazer. Gasps rippled through the bystanders. Olivia stood frozen, horror in her eyes. "Sir," Ava said, forcing calm through her teeth, "you are violating TSA procedure." "Don't tell me how to do my job," Mason hissed. "You people always think the rules don't apply to you." The phrase hung in the air like poison. A young mother clutched her daughter, pulling her closer. Phones recorded every second now, their lenses capturing the growing firestorm. Ava's briefcase hit the floor as Mason shoved her toward the metal detector. The sound echoed, papers shifting inside. Her father's pin tore from her lapel, clinking against the tile before disappearing beneath the conveyor belt. The sting of humiliation burned behind her eyes, but she refused to show it. "Arrest this woman for document fraud." Mason barked into his radio. "Sir," one of the agents began, uncertain. "Now." Security officers hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. Ava knelt, gathering her papers with steady hands. Her lip bled, her blazer torn, but her composure unbroken. Cameras flashed. Passengers whispered. Somewhere a child asked, "Why is that man being mean to her?" Ava looked up slowly, meeting Mason's glare. "You don't know who you're dealing with," she said softly, not as a threat, but a fact. The radio on Mason's shoulder crackled. "Federal escort approaching Gate 12, a voice announced. Mason's confidence flickered. Around them, the airport thrummed with oblivious motion. People boarding planes, sipping coffee, living ordinary lives. But at Gate 12, something extraordinary was unfolding. The collision between prejudice and power was seconds away. Ava straightened her jacket, wiped the blood from her lip, and lifted her chin. If this was the battlefield fate had chosen, she was ready. The terminal air grew heavy with tension. Dozens of passengers had stopped pretending to mind their own business. Cell phones glimmered like tiny spotlights aimed at injustice. At the center stood Ava Taylor, unmoved, her pride the only shield she had left. Opposite her, Mason Clark puffed his chest like a soldier defending his post. Except his enemy wasn't a threat, just a woman on her way to serve her country. Agent Grace Harris and Jordan Johnson, responding to Mason's call, pushed through the crowd. Their faces registered unease as they saw the scene. Paper scattered, blood on Ava's lip, and Mason's hand still clenched. "What's the situation here?" Grace asked, voice steady but wary. "Forgery and identity fraud," Mason said sharply. "She's carrying counterfeit Pentagon documents." Grace crouched, picking up one of the papers from the floor. Her eyes widened slightly. "These look authentic. The seals, formatting, everything checks out. I said it's fraud." Mason snapped, yanking the page from her hand. "And I'm a supervisor here. I decide what's authentic." His voice cracked with fury, his authority unraveling in front of everyone. Ava stood tall, her tone even. "Supervisor Clark, those are official documents classified under federal code. Mishandling them is a violation of national security. Don't quote law to me, lady. I know your type. Think you can flash a fancy title and walk all over the rules." Her type. The words cut deeper than a shove. The onlookers murmured, some outraged, others silently ashamed of how familiar this was. An elderly woman whispered to her husband, "Harold, that poor woman hasn't done anything wrong." Grace's voice was cautious now. "Supervisor, maybe we should verify through operations before escalating." "Enough," Mason barked. "Step aside, or I'll write you up too." He turned on Ava again, fury simmering in every gesture. "Empty your pockets. Take off all jewelry. We'll see what else you're hiding." Ava met his glare. "You're violating protocol and constitutional protections. I will not comply with unlawful demands." The defiance only fueled him. His jaw twitched as he grabbed her briefcase and wrenched it open. A dozen folders burst free, each stamped top secret. The sight silenced the terminal. Even the PA announcements seemed to fade away. Mason's laugh broke the quiet. "Look at this cheap theater. You think printing fake seals makes you a spy? You probably downloaded this from the internet." Grace took a step forward. "Sir, stop. Those markings are real." Mason ignored her, scattering documents across the floor. Satellite photos, classified threat assessments, and security briefings tumbled like confetti of chaos. Ava dropped to her knees, gathering them with careful precision, her movements measured, methodical, as though she were back in the field recovering intelligence under fire. "Do you realize what you're doing?" she asked softly, her calm cutting through the noise. "You're compromising national defense data." Mason leaned closer, his face red, spittle forming at the corners of his mouth. "You're compromising airport security. You people always play the victim." The phrase hung heavy. The murmuring grew louder now, audible disgust, disbelief, anger. Grace activated her body camera fully. Jordan Johnson whispered to her, "This is going to blow up fast." And it did. Mason's radio crackled again. "Federal escort arriving now." Repeat, "Federal escort approaching Gate 12." His reaction was instant panic. "No outside units. I've got this under control." He barked in the mic, "No interference." The dispatcher's voice came back, crisp and firm. "Supervisor Clark, they're here on direct Pentagon authorization." Ava froze mid-motion. She knew the tone of command when she heard it. Help was seconds away. But Mason's paranoia spiked. Of course. A cover-up. She's part of some deep state ring. He lunged, trying to tear the Korean War pin from Ava's lapel. "Let's see what fake symbol you're hiding." Ava stepped back, shielding the pin. "That belonged to my father. You will not touch it." Mason's voice turned savage. "You don't give orders to me." His hand shot forward again, but this time Jordan Johnson intercepted, gripping Mason's wrist. "Enough, Mason. You're out of line." The supervisor shoved him hard. "Don't touch me. You're all in on this." The crowd gasped as Mason stumbled, then whirled around, wild-eyed. His badge gleamed under the harsh lights, the symbol of authority he no longer deserved. A ripple of movement spread through the spectators. Phones lifted higher, recording, streaming. Hashtags were already forming online. The confrontation at Gate 12 wasn't just an argument anymore. It was a national moment unfolding in real time. Ava rose to her feet. Her uniform was scuffed, her pride intact. "Supervisor Clark," she said quietly, "you've crossed every line." He laughed, manic and hollow. "I'm the line." And then came the sound that changed everything, the synchronized footsteps of approaching agents, echoing down the terminal. Mason turned, expecting backup. What he saw instead would dismantle everything he believed about power. The echo of heavy footsteps rolled through Terminal B, cutting across the murmurs and camera clicks. The crowd instinctively parted, creating a narrow corridor of tension. 3 figures in dark suits advanced with measured authority, their pace deliberate, their presence unmistakable. FBI. Mason Clark's relief was instant and foolish. He squared his shoulders, tugged his badge into view, and gestured toward Ava Taylor like a hunter presenting captured prey. "Perfect timing," he said, voice loud enough for the cameras. "This woman is impersonating a government officer. She's carrying forged Pentagon documents and resisting security procedures." Ava didn't move. She stood beside her scattered papers, calm as stone, eyes fixed on the agents approaching. The lead investigator, Agent Sophia Allen, scanned the scene in a single sweep. Bleeding lip, torn blazer, top-secret documents, trembling supervisor. Her hand tightened subtly around her credentials. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," she announced, voice clear and steady. "We're here for our scheduled escort." Mason's smirk widened. "Good. Then you can take her into custody." But Sophia Allen didn't even glance his way. She stepped forward, extended her hand toward Ava, and spoke words that detonated every illusion Mason had left. "Lieutenant Colonel Taylor, we've been expecting you, ma'am." The terminal froze. The crowd gasped audibly, 1,000 eyes shifting from the humiliated woman to the supervisor who just realized what he'd done. Mason's mouth hung open mid-protest, the color draining from his face. Sophia came to attention and saluted. Her 2 fellow agents followed instantly, a synchronized gesture of respect that silenced even the airport announcements. Cameras captured the tableau, the war hero standing bloodied yet unbowed, and the man who tried to break her trembling in the background. Ava returned the salute with calm precision. "At ease, agents. Thank you for arriving promptly." The moment cracked something deep inside Mason. "Wait, this is some mistake." She presented fake documents. Sophia turned toward him slowly. Her eyes were cold steel. "And you are?" "Mason Clark, TSA supervisor. I was conducting a standard interrogation," she cut in, raising a brow. "Assault?" Mishandling of classified material? Which term would you prefer for your report? Laughter and gasps rippled through the crowd. Mason stammered, words failing him for the first time in years. The agents behind Sophia began carefully gathering the scattered files, sealing them in evidence envelopes, snapping photos for the chain of custody. These documents, Sophia said pointedly, carry national security clearance. You've just compromised them on a public floor. Mason's world tilted. I didn't know who she was. That's not the defense you think it is, she replied. Ava adjusted her blazer, her dignity sharper than any uniform. Agent Allen, please secure the materials. My briefing begins in 90 minutes. Yes, ma'am, Sophia said crisply. She turned to Grace Harris, who still had her body camera rolling. Agent Harris, you were witness to this? Grace nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Everything's on record. Mason spun toward his own team for backup, but Jordan Johnson wouldn't meet his eyes. The betrayal of silence was louder than any accusation. Jordan, tell her. Tell her I was following protocol. Jordan's voice was low but steady. You stopped following protocol the moment you decided dignity was a threat. The crowd began applauding softly, first one pair of hands, then dozens. Phones zoomed in, capturing Mason's collapse. His badge, once gleaming with false power, now hung crooked on his chest. Sophia gestured to airport police standing nearby. Escort Supervisor Clark to security holding until federal review. What? You can't do that. I'm TSA. You were TSA? She corrected. As officers approached, Mason backed away, desperation seeping through every movement. This isn't over. I was protecting the country. Ava looked at him with quiet sadness, not triumph. You confuse fear with service, Mr. Clark. They're not the same thing. Her words hung in the air like a verdict. Sophia turned to her agents. Retrieve the colonel's belongings. Prepare the secure transport vehicle. Yes, ma'am. As they moved, the terminal slowly exhaled. The applause grew louder, filling the space where humiliation once echoed. Mason's protest dwindled into mutters as the officers led him away. Ava lifted her father's fallen pin from the floor, brushing away dust. The silver eagle glinted against her palm, a symbol reborn. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, just one long, steady breath of vindication. But even as order returned, Sophia's expression remained grave. She leaned in slightly. Colonel, this won't stay contained. Cameras caught everything. By tonight, it'll be everywhere. Ava met her eyes. Then let it. Maybe this time, the world will see what dignity looks like under fire. Sophia nodded. Understood. Let's get you to the Pentagon. Outside the window, sunlight spilled over the Potomac River. Flights taxied down the runway, engines roaring like distant applause. Gate 12 stood transformed, from a stage of humiliation into a symbol of reckoning. Yet as Ava followed the agents toward the exit, one thought pulsed quietly in her mind. This wasn't the end of Mason Clark's story. It was only the beginning of his reckoning and America's awakening. The terminal, moments ago a place of chaos, now held the weight of history. Every screen and camera lens in Gate 12 captured a scene that no one would soon forget. Ava Taylor, the black woman once humiliated on suspicion of fraud, now being saluted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation in full view of hundreds of witnesses. The applause began as a faint ripple, but soon rose into thunder. Strangers stood on chairs for a better view. Parents whispered to their children about courage and justice. Phones streamed live to millions. The entire airport, once deafening with announcements, fell silent in reverence. Agent Sophia Allen lowered her salute, her expression a blend of professionalism and quiet awe. Colonel Taylor, we're honored to escort you, she said, her voice steady but charged with emotion. Ava nodded, reclaiming her father's service pin from the floor and fastening it back onto her lapel. Let's make sure national security doesn't suffer because of this distraction, she said calmly. Mason Clark's voice broke through the applause. This is insane. She assaulted me. She resisted an officer. No one turned toward him. He was shouting into a void that no longer respected him. His own TSA colleagues looked away. Grace Harris folded her arms and muttered, "You've done enough damage, Mason." Sophia faced him, her authority absolute. "Supervisor Clark, you've interfered with classified government operations, compromised security materials, and violated civil rights under color of authority. You're being detained pending federal review." Mason stumbled backward as Jordan Johnson quietly removed his badge. "Effective immediately. You're relieved of duty," Jordan said, his tone solemn. A gasp swept through the onlookers. Mason's badge, his fragile symbol of power, was no longer his. The gleaming metal now looked like a relic of arrogance. "Wait, you can't take that. I've served this agency for 8 years, he sputtered. Sophia's gaze didn't waver. Then 8 years too long. 2 airport police officers stepped forward, guiding him gently but firmly toward the security checkpoint. Mason's protests turned to desperate muttering, his voice cracking under the weight of humiliation. "I was just following protocol, protecting the country." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman he'd accused of fraud was the only one in the terminal who had truly served her country. As the officers led him away, Ava exhaled quietly. She didn't smile or gloat. Her expression carried the steady grace of someone who had faced worse battles and survived them all. Sophia watched her, noting the composure that only years of military discipline could forge. "Colonel," Sophia said, "we've arranged a private vehicle to the Pentagon. But I must warn you, this footage is already online. It's everywhere." "I'm aware," Ava replied, straightening her jacket. "Maybe it's time people saw what silent endurance looks like in uniform." Outside the windows, sunlight gleamed off departing aircraft. News alerts began buzzing across passengers' phones. Short clips titled "TSA Supervisor Assaults Decorated Officer" were spreading faster than wildfire. The world was already watching. As the agents escorted Ava toward the exit, a young black woman in the crowd raised her voice above the murmurs. "Ma'am, thank you for not letting him break you." Ava turned slightly, her eyes softening. "He never had that power," she replied, before stepping through the secured doors. By the time she reached the waiting vehicle, the internet had exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Gate12Justice, hashtag Dignity Under Fire, and hashtag Colonel Taylor dominated every feed. Morning anchors interrupted broadcasts to replay the footage. The image of 3 FBI agents saluting Ava Taylor became the defining photo of the day, a symbol of respect rising from prejudice. Inside the black SUV, Sophia received constant radio chatter. "Madam Agent," a voice reported, "TSA headquarters is requesting statements. Civil rights groups are calling for immediate action." "Understood," Sophia replied curtly. She glanced at Ava. "Looks like this incident won't be buried like the others." Ava's response was quiet but resolute. "Then maybe it's the start of something greater." As the vehicle pulled away from the airport, Mason Clark's shouts still echoed faintly behind them, muffled, powerless, fading into obscurity. Cameras caught his final moments in uniform. Handcuffed, head bowed, escorted past the same crowd that had once been forced to watch his cruelty. Across the nation, viewers stopped scrolling to witness the raw footage, a powerful image of reversal, of dignity triumphing over abuse. Commentators would later call it the salute heard around the world. Back in the Pentagon's operations wing, the fallout began immediately. Commanders were already reviewing the incident. Federal oversight units were activated. Someone whispered, "This one's going to reach Congress." But for Ava Taylor, the moment wasn't about revenge or politics. It was about reclaiming her father's legacy and ensuring that no soldier's daughter would ever be humiliated in her own country again. As the SUV crossed the Potomac, she looked out the window toward the river glinting in sunlight. Her reflection stared back, tired but unbroken, scarred yet shining. And for the first time that day, she allowed herself to whisper a single sentence meant only for her father's memory. "We're still standing." By noon, the entire country knew her name. Clips from Gate 12 were replaying across every major network. Ava Taylor, her lip bloodied yet her spine unbent, standing before federal agents while a disgraced TSA supervisor was led away in cuffs. The footage spread faster than breaking news could frame it. Within 6 hours, hashtags like hashtag Justice at Gate 12, hashtag Ava Taylor, and hashtag Dignity Under Fire had gathered millions of shares. Airport from Los Angeles to New York buzzed with the same conversation. How had this gone on so long? The answer unfolded quickly. Civil rights lawyers flooded the story, uncovering 47 ignored complaints lodged against Mason Clark over 8 years. Former passengers stepped forward. Their stories echoed the same refrain: unprovoked extra screenings, intimidation, humiliation. Each testimony formed another brick in the wall, closing around him. The FBI Civil Rights Division, now fully engaged under Agent Harper Brown, launched Operation Airport Justice. We'll review every case, every malfunctioning body camera, every complaint dismissed as clerical error, Harper declared at a press conference. Her voice, calm but sharp, resonated with the kind of purpose that signals real change. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the Pentagon convened an emergency briefing to ensure the classified documents Ava had carried were secured. The irony was bitter. Those same papers, once scattered across a terminal floor, contained intelligence that would prevent an international crisis in the Persian Gulf. From her office window, Ava could see news helicopters circling above the Potomac. She turned away from the noise, her expression unreadable. "I didn't ask to become a symbol," she told Sophia Allen, who stood beside her with a tablet full of notifications. Sophia nodded. "Sometimes symbols choose us." At that moment, congressional hearings began forming on Capitol Hill. Director Ethan Scott of the TSA was summoned to testify before Congresswoman Isabella King, who wasted no time. "Director, how does an officer with 47 complaints keep his badge?" Scott fumbled, perspiration forming under the lights. "We're reviewing our internal systems, Congresswoman." She cut him off. "Don't review them. Replace them." The exchange went viral before the hearing even adjourned. Back at Cumberland Correctional's temporary holding facility, Mason Clark sat behind bulletproof glass, his orange jumpsuit a cruel contrast to the Navy uniform he once wore. Across from him, his high-priced attorney Logan Adams set down a thick file. 15-year plea deal, Logan said flatly. "It's the best you're going to get." Mason's eyes twitched. "I was doing my job. She made me look weak." Logan exhaled. "She didn't make you look weak, Mason. You did that yourself." While Mason drowned in denial, Ava found herself flooded with letters from veterans, parents, students, even children who'd watched the video in civics class. Some thanked her for her composure, others for her restraint. But one message from a retired colonel struck deepest. "You reminded the nation that strength doesn't shout. It stands." News anchors replayed her image endlessly, but what struck people wasn't her rank or the scandal. It was her silence, her refusal to respond with hate. On the third night after the incident, CNN aired a special segment hosted by Wyatt Wright, the U.S. attorney overseeing the federal case. Behind him, the footage of Gate 12 looped in slow motion. "This isn't just about one man's racism," he said. "It's about a system that protected him. Tonight, that system is on trial." The line ignited a movement. Protesters gathered outside major airports carrying signs that read, "Respect travels to," and "Dignity at every gate." Influencers, veterans, and civil rights leaders echoed the same message. Accountability had arrived at 30,000 feet. Meanwhile, Ava kept working. She presented her delayed Pentagon briefing flawlessly. Her intelligence prevented the deployment of 2 naval squadrons into hostile waters. The irony wasn't lost on her team. While one man's hatred had tried to ground her, her expertise had kept an entire nation airborne. Back home that evening, she video-called her daughter, Riley Taylor, now a cadet at West Point. Riley's smile filled the screen. "Mom, you're trending again." "I noticed," Ava said, smirking softly. "Let's hope for the right reasons." "They're teaching your story in my ethics seminar," Riley said. "They call it the Gate 12 standard." Ava went silent for a moment, pride flickering in her tired eyes. Then make sure they remember the lesson, not the spectacle. The following morning, Mason Clark's arrest footage aired nationwide. He was escorted out of the courthouse in chains, shouting about conspiracies no one believed anymore. The same cameras that once captured his arrogance now documented his downfall. And yet, as the crowd jeered, Ava turned off her television. She felt no satisfaction, only a quiet understanding that justice, like flight, required lift and drag in equal measure. Across America, policy reform committees convened. Bias training programs were rewritten. Complaint databases went public. For the first time in decades, the words airport security and civil rights appeared side by side on federal legislation drafts. And through it all, the image of Ava standing at Gate 12 endured, unarmed, unflinching, unbroken. But while justice was rising, one final test remained. The courtroom reckoning that would either cement change or let the system revert to silence. The world was ready. The cameras were waiting. And Ava Taylor would once again find herself in the same room as Mason Clark. The marble halls of the Washington, D.C. federal courthouse buzzed with tension as reporters jostled for space. Headlines screamed across every news feed. Gate 12 case goes to trial. Nation awaits verdict. The line to get inside stretched around the block. To the world, it was justice in progress. To Ava Taylor, it was a test of whether dignity truly mattered in the system she had served all her life. She arrived quietly, escorted by Agent Sophia Allen and Agent Harper Brown. Her Navy uniform gleamed under the courthouse lights. Her medals caught the camera's flashes like fire. But her expression was calm, detached. She wasn't there for revenge, only for truth. Across the aisle, Mason Clark sat hunched in a gray suit, the arrogance gone. His hair was thinner, his skin pale from detention. The badge that once made him powerful was gone, replaced by handcuffs resting loosely around his wrists. His attorney, Logan Adams, leaned close and whispered, "Don't speak unless spoken to. Let me handle it." Mason didn't reply. His eyes darted toward Ava and away just as quickly. The presiding judge, Nora Anderson, entered the courtroom, her gavel striking once. Court is now in session. The United States versus Mason Clark. The prosecutor, U.S. Attorney Wyatt Wright, stood crisp and composed. "Your Honor, the defendant stands accused of violating civil rights under color of authority, assaulting military personnel, and compromising classified materials." His tone was measured, but each word carried the weight of national attention. Mason's defense attempted damage control. Logan rose, his voice rehearsed. "My client made poor decisions under stress. He did not intend harm. We asked the court to consider his service record." Wyatt countered sharply. "Service without honor is tyranny. Mr. Clark's so-called record is stained with 47 civil rights complaints, all ignored until now. Today, this courtroom decides if accountability finally has a seat in federal authority." The prosecution's case unfolded like a storm. First came the body camera footage. Mason's voice dripping with contempt. "You people think the rules don't apply to you." The courtroom flinched collectively as the line played over the speakers. Then came the passenger recordings, showing Ava's composure as she gathered classified files off the airport floor while Mason shouted accusations. Next, Agent Grace Harris took the stand. Her testimony was steady. Supervisor Clark disregarded every TSA protocol. He targeted passengers of color, often during peak hours when cameras and oversight were limited. "Did you ever report these incidents?" Wyatt asked. "Yes, multiple times," Grace answered, glancing toward Mason. "They were buried. He always came back to work." When Jordan Johnson followed, his voice cracked slightly. "I wanted to stop him that day, but I hesitated. Watching Colonel Taylor stand her ground taught me that silence makes us accomplices." The prosecution built its case with surgical precision. Victims from across the country appeared one by one on live video feeds. A black cardiologist from Chicago, a Muslim engineer from Detroit, a Latina businesswoman from Phoenix, all recounting the same pattern of humiliation and abuse. Each story drew audible gasps from the gallery. Then came the expert witness, Dr. Amelia Lewis, a psychologist specializing in systemic discrimination. Racial profiling under authority isn't merely unethical, she said. It inflicts trauma comparable to physical violence. It teaches citizens that dignity can be revoked on sight. Ava listened in silence, her hands folded. She didn't need to testify about what she felt that day. The evidence spoke louder than words. Still, when she was called to the stand, the room leaned forward collectively. "Colonel Taylor," Wyatt began, "after everything you endured, why didn't you retaliate?" She paused. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "Because restraint isn't weakness. I fought enemies overseas and prejudice at home. The uniform doesn't protect you from either, but it reminds you what you stand for." Her words drew murmurs of respect from the audience. Even the judge's expression softened for a moment. When the defense took its turn, Logan Adams tried every angle: stress, misinterpretation, false accusation. But the mountain of evidence crushed every argument. At one point, Mason snapped, shouting across the room, "This is political. I was defending national security." Judge Anderson's gavel slammed down. "One more outburst, and you'll be removed from the court." The defense rested early. The silence that followed was heavy with inevitability. Wyatt rose for the final statement. "This case isn't about one officer and one passenger," he said, pacing slowly. "It's about what happens when prejudice hides behind a badge. The Constitution doesn't grant power to humiliate. It grants power to serve." Mr. Clark forgot that. The jury deliberated for only 37 minutes, barely long enough to review the evidence. The foreman stood. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." A collective exhale swept the courtroom. Mason's head dropped into his hands. His wife, seated behind him, quietly left the room without looking back. 2 weeks later, at sentencing, Judge Anderson's tone was resolute. "Mr. Clark, you violated the rights of citizens you were sworn to protect. You weaponized authority and disgraced your uniform. The court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison, 3 years of probation, and a lifetime ban from federal employment." The gavel struck once more, final and unforgiving. Outside, the courthouse erupted with cheers. Reporters swarmed the steps, microphones raised, cameras flashing. But Ava slipped through a side exit with Sophia and Harper, avoiding the spectacle. "You won," Harper said softly. Ava shook her head. "No, we all did. But winning isn't enough. Change has to outlast the outrage." In that moment, she understood something deeper. That justice wasn't a single event. It was a flight that needed constant fuel to stay airborne. The sound of helicopters overhead reminded her that the world was still watching. The question now was whether America would keep its eyes open. 6 months after the trial, the ripples of Gate 12 were still moving through America. What began as a moment of humiliation in an airport had transformed into a wave of reform that touched every level of federal security. The Janet Taylor Airport Dignity Act, named in her honor, had just been signed into law by the president. Its clauses mandated bias training, complaint transparency, and civilian oversight committees for every TSA branch across the nation. On the morning of the signing, Ava Taylor stood at her Pentagon window, sunlight streaming over the Potomac. Her office, once temporary, was now permanent, walls lined with medals, citations, and a framed photograph of her father in uniform. The silver Korean War pin he'd given her gleamed on her lapel, brighter than ever. Across her desk lay a stack of thank you letters from strangers, students, veterans, mothers, and civil servants. They weren't addressed to Colonel Taylor, but simply to the woman who stood her ground. Her phone buzzed. It was a video call from Riley Taylor, her daughter at West Point. Riley's face lit up the screen, pride glistening in her eyes. "Mom, they added your case to our leadership ethics course. They call it the Gate 12 principle." Ava smiled softly. "They should call it the accountability principle." Riley laughed. "They also said you'll be our keynote speaker at graduation next spring." "Then I guess I should start writing something worth saying," Ava replied. At that moment, Agent Sophia Allen entered the office. "Colonel, Operation Airport Justice just concluded. 12 officers terminated, 54 reprimanded, and a nationwide reform board has been established. Harper Brown sends her regards. Ava nodded approvingly. Justice may move slowly, but at least it moves. Sophia smiled. There's one more thing. You've been nominated for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Ava blinked, momentarily speechless. For doing what anyone should have done? For doing it when most wouldn't have dared, Sophia replied. Across town, the story of Mason Clark had taken its final turn. At Cumberland Federal Correctional Institution, he spent his days cataloging library books and attending mandated racial bias therapy sessions. The man who once barked orders now stood in lines, waited for clearance, and answered yes, sir, to every command. His arrogance had dissolved into a quiet, haunted acceptance. His cellmate, Caleb Walker, a man wrongfully imprisoned for 2 decades before being exonerated, had become his unlikely teacher. You can't undo what you did, Caleb told him one night. But you can start by admitting what it cost others to survive you. Mason said nothing, but for once he listened. Back in D.C., news outlets ran retrospectives titled, "The Woman Who Changed Federal Aviation Forever." Commentators debated what made the moment so powerful. Some said it was the salute. Others said it was the silence before it. But everyone agreed. The look on Ava Taylor's face as she rose from the terminal floor had captured the essence of quiet defiance. A month later, Ava stood before a sea of graduates at Howard University, delivering the commencement address that would echo through generations. Cameras streamed it live to millions. Her voice was steady, her words carved with purpose. You will meet people who measure your worth by the color of your skin, your accent, or your gender. They will try to convince you that dignity is something they can give or take away. Don't believe them. Dignity isn't granted, it's guarded. You protect it by refusing to surrender it. The audience erupted in applause. Students rose to their feet, tears glistening in the sunlight. Among them, Riley stood proudly in her cadet uniform, hand over heart. In that moment, Ava felt something deeper than victory. It was peace. The kind her father used to describe after surviving battle. The kind that comes not from defeating enemies, but from defending one's soul. Later that evening, she returned home to the quiet of her study. The framed headline from that chaotic day rested on her shelf. Gate 12 hero redefines American justice. She traced the words gently with her fingers, then looked up at the small, folded flag beside it. We did it, Dad, she whispered. We turned disgrace into duty. Outside, the city glowed, sirens, lights, voices blending into one rhythm. A rhythm of progress. And somewhere, perhaps far from the headlines, an airport employee paused before mistreating a traveler, remembering the woman who stood unshaken beneath the glare of injustice. Ava Taylor's story had become more than an incident. It was a mirror, a reflection of who a nation could be when courage met compassion. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and smiled faintly. Justice had taken flight, and this time, it wasn't landing anytime soon. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're tuning in from. If you enjoyed today's story, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another pulse-pounding cinematic tale. Before you go, tell us in the comments, have you ever witnessed someone stand up to injustice when it mattered most? Your story could inspire someone else to do the same. Because courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply refuses to kneel.